Hello, online Revelation class. I hope that you're doing well today. I hope that over these last few months, as we've been studying the book of Revelation, that you have been encouraged and challenged. I hope that you've received the blessing that we talked about many months ago about reading the book of Revelation gives us an encouragement, a reminder that even though we live in a world of evil and sin, and it might seem that Satan is in control, we know that God has won, He is winning, and He continues to win, and He allows us to be victors with Jesus because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and we have that hope. Last night, December the 3rd of 2025, we had our last family reunion in person for the year of 2025, and we just are excited to see what God's going to be doing upcoming. So we want you to be aware that our next in-person class will be on January the 7th, and we are going to be starting a new section with Revelation chapter 12. This is a major change in the change of tone in the book of Revelation, and we're going to be calling those chapters, "The Dragon and His Helpers Oppose Jesus Christ." Because of the schedule, and that because we're going to be taking a few weeks off, we're waiting to get into that study. But last evening, on December the 3rd, I shared a video that was shared with me by Mary Lynn Nice, and I thought that there were some things in there that would be very beneficial. We had planned on that last family reunion in person for 2025. We'd planned on that being a question and answer time, and I only received one question that was submitted, and I'll deal with that after you watch this video. But other than that, for this whole study that we've been having in Revelation, the major question that keeps coming up is about interpretations and different views of how to look at Revelation. And with that in mind, I thought it would be very helpful for us to watch this video before we go any further. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that and understand that there's a lot of things that we actually do agree on despite some differences because of different interpretations. So I want you to go ahead and just watch this short video. It's about 20 minutes long, and then I'll come back at the end and have a few more thoughts.
Our first goal is to remove a little of the mystery and mystique concerning this book. Some people don't want to read it, don't want to discuss it. Other people want to spend their whole lives digging into the details. We may actually add a little to the mystery and mystique today, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to look at some of the main themes, and you're going to have to keep that in mind today because we're not going to drill down into all the details about the seals. You're not going to leave knowing exactly the answers to all of your questions, frankly, because I don't think that that's how apocalyptic literature works. I think when apocalyptic literature is, that's what Revelation is, right? Revealing. When God does that, the revelations, the visions, create impressions. They're not for us to draft out and dig down into the weeds and get all the details, to create impressions. And we're going to look at some of that today. But not just to know the main themes. Our goal is to live out the main themes. And so we just don't want to know the facts, pour all the facts and biblical data into our brains so that we know seals and trumpets and bowls. The goal is to live out the gospel. What are all of the details pointing to? What impression should motivate us to live out the gospel and follow Jesus more closely? And the last of our goals, the fourth, goes something like this: that we will love our brothers and sisters more faithfully. Paraphrase, we'll have some hermeneutical humility. We're not going to think that we know everything and everybody who disagrees with me is basically an idiot. Maybe some of them are, but that's not because of their view. We need to recognize there are good, godly people on all sides of these discussions. And so we're going to look at a few different views today. The goal is not to load your gun with ammunition to prove you're right. The goal is to say, I don't understand a whole lot more than I do understand. I do know some things. Let's live out of the things that we do know. So remember, to create an impression more than dig down and, drill into all the details. Here's how we're going to start. Let's look at some areas of agreement. Lots of disagreement. We'll mention a couple things, but let's look at some areas of agreement. Here are the things that we talk about here. Absolutes, convictions, and preferences, right? Areas of agreement. Absolutes, we say, are things that are clearly and regularly taught. Here's a reality. The things in Revelation chapter 6 are not clearly and regularly taught. In fact, they're taught here, maybe a few places in the Old Testament. They're not clear. They're weird and strange, right? So we're talking about things you may have a conviction about. That's fine. You may have a preference. I think most of us would have a preference. We talk about absolutes, convictions, and preferences. And so when it comes to areas of disagreement, they obviously would not be an absolute. And so be careful about making your convictions or preferences absolutes and then causing division in the body. We know God wants us to be together. All right, so here's a short list of areas of agreements. All right, here we go. Number 1, Jesus will return. That's an absolute. We don't know all the details surrounding that. The second coming is an absolute. It's clearly and regularly taught. You can't be family and not believe that. Second thing, all people will be judged. Did you recognize that in the chapter? So judgment's coming. Justice is coming. And the reality is that we all deserve that justice. We deserve to be on the wrong side of that. But because of God's provision in the Lamb, Jesus, our Passover lamb, paid our penalty. Thirdly, there will be separation between Christians and non-Christians, between believers and unbelievers, however you want to phrase that. Everybody believes, right? That's clearly, regularly taught, believed across denominational lines. Christians go to a new heaven and new earth. That's how the Revelation ends. And non-Christians, separation from God and alienation. They are areas of agreement, all right? Can we say yes? Yeah, good. Everybody believes on that. Well, let's talk a little bit about some areas of disagreement. Oh, no, we have another agreement one. To give you, you go to a football game, you need to know the players. So I made a little sheet for you. Next one. Let's talk about our two teams. We have Team Dragon and Team Lamb. So as you go through Revelation, everybody agrees which players are on which team. And so you may not know all the details, but we do know the two teams. Here they are. Team Dragon, if you're reading one of these names, you know that's Team Dragon. Babylon, Dragon, Beast 1, Beast 2, one from the sea, one from the land. Jezebel, Nicolaitans, Bam. That's the bad team. That's Yankees, Cowboys, right? Bad team. Lamb's team, right? Team Lamb, here we go. New Jerusalem. The Lamb, obviously, God on the throne. The witnesses, we'll talk about them in a few weeks. The woman, angels, 24 elders, 4 living creatures, 7 spirits, right? Team Dragon, Team Lamb. Keep that in mind. That'll help you when you read through the book. You get lost. Okay, 2 teams. Here's how I go. All right, areas of disagreement now. Now, we need a lot of space here. I need grace, and you need grace to listen to me. You need to know right up front, I love all this. Most of you probably don't, which means you're going to have to hang in there for the next few minutes. But I do look for the big picture. What I want you to know is there are good, godly, really smart people, smarter than us, on all sides of these issues. So it's not a test of orthodoxy. It's not a mark of whether they're really Christian or not. Good people trying to figure out what the Bible teaches on all sides. We talked about 4 approaches to the book before. We talked about the preterist approach, historicist approach, futuristic, idealistic, right? 4 approaches. But here's what I thought. Rather than just tell you the words, let me make an attempt to show you, right? Some of you are more visual. So here's my attempt at showing you. So I drew 2 axes. If you're a math person, that's the X and Y axis. So here's how it works. The x-axis is going to be the timeline, past, present, future. So future's kind of in the middle, right? You got past, present, future. See that? You got that? The vertical axis is going to be literal on the bottom. So these people are going to read things in the text and they're going to say, oh, yeah. I know exactly what that means, right? When the sun gets dark, that means you can't see when you go outside. When the moon turns to blood, that means it's red, right? I'm going to dig into the details. On the top of the y-axis is a symbolic view. This view would be much more impressionistic. They're not going to dig down and try to line up, correlate every detail to what's going on, either historically or in the future or even today. They're going to say, no, John is communicating things that Jesus showed him, and he doesn't have words to really describe that, and so he's creating an impression. All right, next slide. Here's where we go. Hang in and I'll tell you what it means. Here we go. If this is confusing, take a nap for 30 seconds. Okay, remember past, present, and future. Notice, the preterists are on the literal end of the continuum, right? They're literal. They're going to line up the details of the text. So they're going to line up the four horsemen, right? They're going to line up what they mean with what happened in the past. Right after Jesus, well, we'll talk about this later. Right after Jesus was crucified and resurrected, a lot of the details are going to be first century. Literal details. They're going to interpret it literally. Futurists are just like preterists in that they're going to look at the details literally. So they're going to say, yeah, it didn't happen in the past though, right? It didn't happen yet. It's going to happen in the future, but all those details I'm taking literally. I'm going to look at what happened and say, this is how it's going to be. Futurist. Got that? Historicists is probably a little above that because they have to say things like this. The 7-year tribulation is not literal 7 years. That's going to be the time between the first and second coming. So they're not quite as literal as the first two, but they're going to be along the timeline between the first and second coming. Now, if you're talking about the idealistic group or the symbolic group, they're not on the literal end. They're on the symbolic end. They're going to say, yeah, impressions, recurring themes. We're not looking for things that happened in detail. We're not looking for future to happen with all the details, but creating impressions. Just like often, you read in the Old Testament, impressions. All right, got it? So that's how it works. Now, how many of you would be interested? I hesitate this next slide. Some of you think, I knew he was cockeyed, right? I knew he was unbalanced. But okay, now I need to say this. It really doesn't matter what I believe, right, when it comes to these details. Calvary Church does not have a position. So you can be a preterist, a historicist, a futurist, you can be an idealist, it doesn't matter. But it's maybe helpful for you to see how I'm going to be, have been, and will work with the text. Here's how it works. When I come to a passage, whether it's in Revelation or anywhere, I need to ask, and any good person trying to understand text would say, what did it mean to the original readers, right? So John's writing to 7 actual churches that had people in them. What did they understand based on what John wrote? Now, that may not be the end of it, but that's where I have to start. I then look and say, yeah, but you know what? Apocalyptic literature is impressionistic, not detail-driven. And so I'm going to tip that thing up a little bit, and here's what I'm going to say. I think all of the views, preterist, historicist, futurist, idealist, I think they all have positive contributions. I think they all have some problems. Of course, my view doesn't have any problems, right? My view's no, but at least I'm trying to say, how can we maximize the strengths, minimize some of the weaknesses? Now, here's how that works in practice. I'll let you know how I think some prophecy works. If you read some Old Testament prophecy, here's what you find. There's often an initial fulfillment. But that initial fulfillment almost becomes a model, almost becomes a type that is repeated. It recurs, but then an ultimate fulfillment comes. So, for example, in the Old Testament, read Isaiah. I just finished reading Jeremiah. Read Isaiah. Here's what happens. Babylon is in the crosshairs, right? A lot of the prophecies in the Old Testament are against Assyria, against Babylon. They're literally fulfilled the first time, but Babylon becomes a model. Babylon becomes a symbol. Babylon becomes a recurring theme for God's judgment on wickedness. And what do we find in Revelation? Ultimate Babylon that winds up getting destroyed. Here's the problem that I get into when people speculate and they start to say, oh, I know what the last one's. I don't know what the last one's going to be. Here's what I do know. When the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in the first century, they thought that was the end of the world. When Hitler was conquering Europe, they thought that was the end of the world. My guess is people in the Middle East today, they think, this sure seems like the end of the world. I don't know when the ultimate's coming. My job is not to pinpoint the last one. We'll know in hindsight when the ultimate one comes. I'm going to say there usually is an initial fulfillment. That initial fulfillment often becomes a model, often becomes a theme. Then the ultimate will come. But from our perspective, we can't see the ultimate. Here's a New Testament example. In 1 John 2, I think it's like 18, John says, this is the last hour. That's kind of interesting, right? The last hour. And that was like 2,000 years ago. The last hour. And some of you are looking for the Antichrist. I tell you, Antichrists have already come. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be an ultimate one. It means that there was an initial fulfillment for John in 1 John, right? Those people leaving the congregation, those people leaving the assembly, they were anti-Christ, right? Instead of Jesus, right? Opposed to Jesus. But they're going to become a model. Antichrists are coming. Yeah, will there be an ultimate one? Yeah, I guess there will. But I don't know when the ultimate one's coming. We don't know from our perspective. Make sense? Oh, you don't have to agree with it. But that's kind of my approach as we go. I'll try to keep you up to speed on some other views as we go through, just so you don't think it has to be my way. Okay, two issues we have to talk about if we're flying high here. The first one is tribulation, or the tribulation. Now, what in the world is the tribulation? All right, interestingly, that word appears often in the Bible. It becomes a technical term for some people. It becomes a general term for other people. Tribulation is a time of trouble, a time of difficulty. All right, so let's go back to our picture and let's see if we can put our views on the timeline. Where did the preterist put the tribulation? Right there. I think it's there. Go ahead, put it on. Next one. There we go. Right after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. That's the great tribulation. That happened then. Historicists are going to say, no. Tribulation is not a technical term. And I do want to say to you, it's not a technical term. Context will determine what tribulation means. So if you're a futurist and you think there will be a 7-year tribulation, that's fine. But you can't use the word to determine where that is. Context will have to tell you that. Now here's put my picture up there still. Go back. I'm not done. Notice a historicist, their view of tribulation is between the two comings. The preterist, it's tucked in right after the first coming. Historicist, between the comings. Now, it's hard to see this on the chart, or it's not hard to see, but we should have done something different maybe. Notice idealist goes further back than Jesus. Recurring themes. And so idealists are going to say, yeah, these themes, these recurring themes of tribulation, they were before Jesus. And then Jesus maybe accentuated it, and they continue. Now you're saying, well, where's the futurist one? Yeah, well, we need another arrow for that, right? So here we go. Here's the futurist one. I think, next one. Okay, yeah, you need a rapture for the futurist. Here we go. All right, here's how the futurist ones go. All right, now the tribulation will be the period of time between the rapture and the second coming. Now, the other groups, preterist, historicist, idealist, they do not have a rapture as a second event from the second coming. It's all the same event. So the rapture and second coming are the same event. Futurists, at least of the dispensational variety, they're going to separate them and put the tribulation between those two. All right? Well, what's the rapture then? Well, for futurists, right, particularly dispensationalists, they love talking about the rapture. Historicists, preterists, idealists, they're not big on the rapture. They may believe in it, right, but it's the same event as the second coming. Here's what you need to know. The word rapture does not appear in Revelation. In fact, the word rapture does not appear in the Bible. That doesn't mean the concept does, and I think we have the Thessalonian verses. All right, so here's where the concept of rapture comes from, right? It comes from 1 Thessalonians 4:15. So let me read them, and then we'll talk about them. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. Euphemism, die. We won't precede those who die. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, the voice of the archangel, and with a trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up. There's the word, caught up, together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. That's where that idea comes from. Now, where did the word rapture come from? Here's where it came from. It comes from the caught up language. When the Bible was translated into Latin, when Latin became kind of the main language of the world, not Greek, they translated caught up by the word raptio. We get the word raptor from that. All right, what is a raptor? A raptor is a bird that flies down, seizes its prey, and swoops it away. So raptor becomes bird swoops it away, right? Rapture, Jesus comes to swoop away his people. Got that? That really is like the place for rapture. The context in 1 Thessalonians is about people who died. The context is not what's going to happen to all of this. And often rapture is presented as a secretive event. It didn't sound real secretive when I read those verses, right? We got trumpets and loud voices. That sounds more like second coming, which is why the other group's going to say, well, it's the same event. Futurists, dispensational types, they're going to say, no, different event. I don't know. But let me quiz you to show you how that view is probably the majority view in America. It's not the majority view in the world. It certainly wasn't the majority view historically. So let me ask you a couple questions. All that stuff between 6 and 19 is often perceived as the tribulation, right? It's not a party, right? Things are really bad if you read those verses. When's that tribulation stuff happening? So here's the quiz. If all hell breaks loose, which view would you prefer? Would you rather be here through all that hell breaking loose? Would you rather be here for part of it? Or would you rather escape all that stuff? Which would you rather be? Well, it's kind of significant then. In America, we don't like to experience much, so we're going to go with the view in which we're not here and all the bad people are left behind. See how that works? So I'm not trying to diminish your view. I'm not telling you which view to believe. I'm trying to say, you know what? There are complex issues here. If you're only going to work with the text, you could come up with any of the positions that we've looked at, and they would be valid. Don't separate. Don't become dogmatic in your perspective when there are good, godly, smart people on different sides of the same coin. All right, we're good?
So I hope that video was helpful. I found that even though I'm sure that particular teacher and I wouldn't agree on everything, I agree wholeheartedly with the general principles. That even though we might have some differences of interpretation of the book of Revelation, we can still be brothers and sisters in Christ. Now, I've said this before, but I want to say it again, that we here at Stillwater do not have a one-size-fits-all interpretation of the book of Revelation. You can have very different views and still be part of the church, not just part of the church here at Stillwater, but also part of the church universal. that we know that Revelation specifically really does appeal to different people in different ways, depending on your situation, your context, and your culture. But there are some essentials that I would also agree that we are needing to be in agreement about, regardless of what your interpretation might be. First of all, that Jesus will return. Again, that is something that we see not just in Revelation, but outside of Revelation, that we know is going to take place. We also see, same thing, a second area of agreement of an essential, that all people will be judged. And while that might be uncomfortable for us to understand, we know that there is going to be judgment, and that you are either going to be for or against the Lord. And that's the third area of agreement, is that there's going to be a separation, that those that believe and follow Jesus and make him the king of their lives, that they will go be with the Lord for all eternity, and those that have not accepted Jesus, that there will be a separation and a punishment. I thought that the video, that he explained very well that there are two teams, and we see that, good and evil, as he called it, Team Lamb and Team Dragon, and we're certainly going to be getting more into that as we get further into the book of Revelation. But I do think it's important that we all agree that there are some that are for the Lord and some that are against it. There's only two teams. You're either for the Lord or you are against him, good and evil. And then finally, one other point that was not on the video, but I thought was worth mentioning because we've talked about it many times, goes back to what I said was the main understanding to be able to get the full understanding of the book of Revelation. Goes back to Revelation chapter 2, verse 10, where we see that we need to remain faithful even to the point of death, and we'll receive the crown of life, the crown of victory. And so again, that idea of remain faithful no matter the situation, no matter persecution, the hardships that come, remain faithful. And those are the things that I want us to really be focusing on. We can always have disagreements, we can have different interpretations, but those things we need to continue to unite on and understand that we may not always see eye to eye, but those areas we can be in complete agreement on, understanding that they are essential. I've said this many times in this study, is that there's a lot of things in Revelation that we just don't know. I've given a lot of my interpretation, things that I've read, studied, and that make a lot of sense to me personally, but just because it makes sense to me, I am not expecting that just because the preacher says that this is the way, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the expectation that everyone would think that way. I have zero doubt that when it all plays out, and that when we're with the Lord, that there will be things that we didn't get right. And whether that's me or any other interpretation, there are definitely going to be areas that we didn't get right. But again, the purpose of Revelation is not to be able to have a clear understanding of this is going to happen and then this is going to happen. It is to encourage us to remain faithful. I was sharing last night in class, in the in-person class, is that there continues to be stories of much persecution. I was just reading about the persecution that is taking place in India, and it's really bad. And for Christians there, they need to be reminded that even though they are experiencing much tribulation, pain, and suffering because of the evil that is going on, that Satan is unleashing on his people, on the Lord's people, they need to remain faithful. And we need to have that same reminder that even though things are going to get hard and difficult because evil does exist, we need to remain faithful to Jesus through it all. And so I hope, if nothing else, that this study in Revelation has helped you to be encouraged by that. We're halfway through, and I want to give kudos to you for being able to get through half of the book of Revelation. Revelation is, again, it's challenging. It pushes us. It is difficult to fully understand. But I hope that in doing so, in studying it, that we are growing closer to the Lord. I did want to address the question, just in case others had a similar question. A few weeks ago, we read there in Revelation chapter 10, verse 4, we read, and when the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up what the seven thunders said, and do not write it down. And the question was, going back to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, that he says that concerning the hour and the day of when the Son of Man would return, that no one knows, including the Son, no one knows when Jesus would return except for the Father. Now, when I gave that teaching on Revelation 10:4, I gave as a possibility that perhaps there was great detail given of when the Lord's return would take place, and that's why a voice from heaven, from the throne, says, do not record down. Because everything that we've seen in the book of Revelation, John is witnessing these things, and he has been instructed to write it down. And this is one of those situations that he is told, do not write down what you see. And so, with that, it's important for us to understand that there are things that happen in heaven, and there are things that happen in the mind of God that are not for us. Now, when I said that maybe it was specific details about the return of Jesus, well, that's a possibility and something that I've read. I do think it's important to understand that Jesus is true. And when he says that, don't expect me to tell you the time that I'm coming, because no one knows except for the Father. Whether that's what was said, we have no idea, because John wasn't allowed to record it. This is speculation. The important thing to study and understand with that is that there are things above that we just do not know. Now, that bothers a lot of people. It bothers a lot of people that God would not give us all the information for us about all time. But we need to remember that God's thoughts are not our thoughts, and God's ways are not our ways. And we should be comfortable with the fact that we might know many things, but we are not going to know everything. And that can either encourage us to trust the Lord more, or it can discourage, and we've seen both. But hopefully, we can be encouraged to know that God's plan is faithful and it is true. And that even though we may not understand what's going on and why things are going on, that we know that God is in control and we don't need to know. So I appreciate the question. I appreciate the questions about, should Revelation be taken literal or is this symbolic? As I've said, my personal opinion and belief is that the book of Revelation is all, if not mostly all, symbolic. And this is symbolic language rather than literal. But if when you're reading it and you take everything in there literally, I still will look at you as a brother or sister in Christ. And so there have been a lot of questions about that, and there are going to continue to be a lot of questions about interpretation and about the way that we approach the book. But the important thing is, again, remain faithful. God wins. He has won, and he will continue to win. I hope that you will be able to continue. If you're able to come in person, man, I would love to see you there on January the 7th. But if you're not, feel free to send me an email and just with any questions or thoughts that you might have, about the text, and perhaps even send me an email. It's Chris at stillwaterchristian.com, CHRIS at stillwaterchristian.com. And would love to hear from you. So with that in mind, thank you again for being a participant in the study. I hope that you will continue to be encouraged. I hope that as we take this break to celebrate Jesus' coming the first time, that we will remember that he will come again. But this time he will not come in Bethlehem there and be born and laid in a manger. But this time he is going to come, and that all the world will see, and every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. May God bless you and keep you, and we'll see you soon.